Outback Stories.
Outback Stories celebrates the pioneering spirit of Australia. It makes little difference if your family came on the First Fleet or on a leaky boat last week. Our unique national identity was born and bred in the Outback. These are your stories.
A great chunk of modern Australia's financial story was built on the dreams and determination of early fossickers.
Australia has been blessed with minerals. It's been our saving grace and our curse.
The discovery of gold in 1851 changed Australia forever, adding well over 1 million people in just 2 gold-crazed decades when the world turned upside down. It was also important socially, as the gold fossickers forged an independent working spirit that became a major part of who we are as a people.
Bright fine gold, bright fine gold, 1 a pecker, 2 a pecker, bright fine gold.
It has been said that mateship was born in the tent cities of the gold rush. Diggers needed a mate to work their riverbed patch and, more importantly, when they commenced digging like rabbits, one down the shaft and one at the pit head.
It's off to the diggers we'll go, whether they'll let us or no. We'll scramble for gold through wet and cold, and off to the diggers we'll go. It's off to the diggers we'll go.
In some ways, the colonial government wanted to suppress the news of gold, for they feared bolters would simply up and leave their posts and head out to find their fortune. They had good reason to be concerned, as thousands of colonials did exactly that, downing pens and tools and heading inland from Sydney and Melbourne.
Once you get to looking for gold, you never do give up trying for it.
As the cry of "Gold!" echoed across the world, fortune hunters came from the 4 corners of the globe, including many who had tried their luck on the Californian goldfields. Most were ill-equipped to travel the distance to the goldfields, many commencing to walk after arriving by ship with little thought of food and provisions, let alone digging equipment. Tales of desperation and ruination were many.
Digging holes in the ground where there's gold to be found, and most times where gold it is not. A man's like a rabbit with this digging habit, and like one he ought to be shot.
Tent cities sprung up around the rivers. Hopeful diggers found a spot, pegged it out, and started to furnish their tent, or lean-to, with whatever was available, such as buckets, shovels, rope, spare clothes, and memories of home and loved ones. Although a certain honour system was maintained, some protected their belongings by chaining fierce mastiffs or bulldogs to the entrance of their tent. Colonials stuck in their groups, corn stalks here, crow-eaters over there, etc., as did the various ethnic groups: English, Irish, Danes, Germans, Swedes, French, and of course the celestial Chinese. In 1853, the first boatload of Chinese miners arrived in Victoria. Between 1854 and 1855, around 31,000 Chinese arrived in the Australian goldfields. To the diggers, the Chinese were everywhere. They were colourfully attired, wore pigtails, built odd-looking temples, spoke a strange tongue, and worked like devils. The smart ones opened general stores and tea houses. The majority of diggers were identifiable by 4 items of clothing. They had a recognisable look, topped with a wide-brimmed cabbage tree hat. Nearly all diggers wore a kerchief around their necks, using it to soak up perspiration and to cover their mouth during dust storms. A bright red shirt was a sign of the times. Red cloth must have been cheap to buy, for many reports tell of a sea of red shirts. The main reason they chose red was that it didn't show the dirt and didn't need much washing. The fourth look was that of the newly arrived immigrant, commonly referred to as the new chum. Often these arrivals came in an English gentleman's look, sometimes complete with a top hat. But it didn't take long for them to realise such an outfit was far from practical or acceptable in sunny Australia. The goldfields were extremely noisy places, and the diggers liked nothing better than firing guns into the night skies. Around 9 p.m, firearms blasted any semblance of silence to announce diggers were going to sleep. However, shots continued to be fired right through the night. If the gold held out, the tent cities evolved to become small townships with a general store, coffee tent, printing office, police station, and 1 or 2 hotels. The arrival of a bank on the goldfields was especially welcome. Most miners were justifiably paranoid about being thumped on the head and robbed of their gold nuggets. Security was vital, but not easy to arrange. Most miners carried their nuggets in a leather pouch until they could arrange to get to the city where it could be melted down and converted to gold sovereigns at the mint. At one stage, Australia boasted more gold sovereigns in circulation than any place on earth, including London.
Miners didn't like promissory notes because a bank cheque from New South Wales wasn't necessarily accepted in South Australia. The same applied to some extent with gold sovereigns, because it implied that some mints were inferior to others. There was also the problem that bushrangers, well, they preferred banknotes. They were lighter.
In larger towns, there were shops of every description, from the finest produce to the doubtful. Butchers, for example, hung their meat from hooks on the front of their stores, ignoring the plagues of flies, and bakers offered the plainest of loaves to an impressive selection of fancy bread and puddings. The gold town of Hill End even offered oysters and other seafood, despite being a long coach ride inland. Ice, transported in special ice ships from North America, was loaded on stage coaches and sent to the gold towns for shaved drinks, an expensive luxury. Cafes served tea, coffee and hot meals, depending on what was available. Tent makers, chandlers, saddleries and blacksmiths supplied the basics, all at inflated prices. Singing rooms, places where the latest songs were performed in a sing-along style, were extremely popular, and each town had its local favourites.
Our fathers came in search of gold. The claim, well, it proved a duffer. The syndicates and the banks went broke, and so we had to suffer. We're all for freedom, for ourselves and mates of toil. Australia's on the wallaby, and the billy's on the boil.
Gambling was a major entertainment, and fortunes were made, lost, and made again. By far the major pastime was drinking. Alcohol was everywhere, and not always of the best quality. Chaos ruled as new gold rushes were announced in all the colonies. Miners had to contend with lean and often dangerous times. Mining leases created social upheaval and, in Victoria, led to Australia's most significant early political event, when infuriated miners challenged the authority of the colonial government in what became known as the Eureka Stockade. There was an unwritten law not to ask too many questions of your fellow diggers. Many had secret lives. Some were ex-convicts, and most, when asked where they had come from, would reply with, "Down the Lachlan side," or simply, "the Mallee." When miners struck it rich, they celebrated, often proving the old maxim, "A fool and his money are soon parted." Celebrating miners even ate sandwiches using 10-pound notes as filling, washed down with a bucket of French champagne. The gold rush era lasted until the end of the 1860s. However, it was by no means the end of gold prospecting or mining. In truth, the waves of determined diggers had virtually exhausted the alluvial gold by dredging the rivers and scouring gullies and mountains. Digging deeper was both expensive and dangerous, and by the 1870s mining companies had been established to drill, blast, and dig deeper into the earth. Coal was excavated from the earliest days of European settlement. Of course, there were other riches to mine, and like moles we dug deep into the earth for nickel, lithium, iron ore, bauxite, lead and zinc.
Don't go down in the mine, Dad. Dreams very often come true. Daddy, you know it would break my heart if anything should happen to you. Just go and tell my dreams to your mates, as true as the stars that shine. Something is going to happen today, so Daddy, don't go down the mine.
When the main wave of prospecting passed, there were still thousands of men, and some women, who determinedly stuck to alluvial and small shaft mining. In many cases, these were hatters, lone prospectors who preferred to stay away from other folks.
It's terrible. You're going to find it next day. It's always the next day you're going to be onto it.
It was said some were too far gone with the gold madness to return to a normal life. There are still such people in Australia today, living a scant existence by panning riverbeds, digging holes like rabbits, and believing that a fortune will be found tomorrow.
Digging holes in the ground where there's gold to be found, and most times where gold it is not. A man's like a rabbit with his digging habit, and like one he ought to be shot.
Rad Dawson, an old-time prospector, summed it up perfectly.
We found gold too, but there was too much Australia mixed with it.